Hello, everybody. Welcome into another episode of Arsenal Fan Circle. This is our first season, the 18th episode. And right now we have a very, very interesting segment to delve into. And I have a special guest, sports psychologist Steve Cohen. Steve, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
I've been talking back and forth with you, Steve, about getting you on the show, and we've done some phone tag for a few weeks, but now we finally have you to talk about Arsenal and the mentality of the players. But firstly, Steve, can you tell us a little something about you and your background and how you got into the field of sports psychology?
Sure. So, my background, like I said, is in sports psychology. I have a master's degree in sports psychology from Miami University out here in the United States. Um, for the last 6 years, I've been working with the military, with the United States Army. They hire sports psychologists to help the soldiers prepare for the challenges of being a soldier, both to perform, to stay mentally tough, but also to maintain a resilient mindset. But prior to the work that I did with the work I'm doing with the military, I obviously was working with sports teams and with athletes quite a bit after I got my graduate training wrapped up. So I worked with all levels of performers, as high as professional athletes, as well as amateurs and youth sports, high school, college, Division One. So quite a variety of different level of sport, but also the different types of sports. Like we have baseball, and cross country, and football, and just a lot of different areas as well that the idea of sports psychology has applied to. And then I also have some interests on my own of video games and gaming and esports. So I've been on a few podcasts and talked a little bit about the impact that the mindset has on being able to perform in that setting as well.
Yeah, Steve, I found you through. I want to give a shout out to MetaMinds as well. You did a podcast with them, so if anybody would have the opportunity to check that out, MetaMinds on Twitter. Can you talk about that experience with that podcast?
Sure. Yeah. So 2 years ago, I actually reached out to a group of guys doing a podcast for the game Destiny. I don't know if you're familiar with that game. But they had a podcast called Crucible Radio, and on that podcast, they just talked a lot about how your mindset of what it's like to be up against stiffer competition and always trying to improve and being able to practice in a deliberate way. A lot of discussion about that. So I did several appearances on that show, and since then I've gotten requests from several other podcasts, and so like the Metagames Mind podcast with the Smash community was just another opportunity. The guys reached out to me, and there were just a couple of really, really nice guys, really well-produced show, and I had a great time talking to those guys. I'm not even really huge Smash player by any means, but their community and the fighting game community as a whole is really bought into the 1v1 competition of how does your mind impact your performance, especially at the esports, the competitive level. So there's just a great opportunity to continue to apply the knowledge and the interest that I have in sports psychology to just a different community.
Yeah, I listened to the MetaMinds podcast, and it had a really great vibe with the two hosts that you talked to. It was just a really well produced and entertaining show. A question for you, Steve. Do you notice a difference between a individual sport like gaming and a team sport such as, say, soccer, football, volleyball, any of the above?
Oh yeah, absolutely. There's a whole host of research to show the differences between individual and team sports, and I think one of the biggest things to kind of notice. With an individual sport, it's all on you. If you make a mistake, you can only blame yourself for that, right? Whereas there's a little bit of diffusion of responsibility when you're working in a team environment. But I think in in general, we as human beings are sort of social in nature, and we gain a lot from the connection that we have with others. And so there's a lot of support that exists on a team sport, as opposed to when you're on an individual sport level, you might have some interactions with a coach, or maybe some people that also compete at your level, but you don't have that same kind of support network that you would have on a team in one of those team sports. So I think that's one of the biggest differences.
And you mentioned work with soldiers, and obviously the mentality that goes into that as well. Do you find that that is obviously at a heightened level, being that their lives are on the line if they make a mistake?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, obviously working with athletes in sports, they're fully invested and heavily invested in their success and their performances. But at the end of the day, it's not a life or death situation for them. Whereas, working with the soldiers in the military, those decisions that they make and how they respond to adversity, how confident that they can go into uncertain situations, how well they're able to manage their anxiety and their stress and their arousal levels, prior to an engagement. Those decisions and those actions could be life or death for them. So there's obviously just a different sense of urgency to try to learn these particular skills and concepts and apply them in a deliberate way instead of just kind of hoping that they happen. So it's been a very enjoyable experience working with that population, which is a group really that I didn't have much of a background before I started working in that particular job.
And Steve Cohen, sports psychologist, thanks for coming on. Do you find further that different individuals, different soldiers, deal with these details in different ways and excel at different levels?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's so many different factors of why somebody would be able to maintain the proper mindset, mental toughness, and be resilient. But a lot of people kind of have to go through their own adversity and challenges. They sort of learn by having to deal with that and overcoming it. Obviously, different levels of maturity, different beliefs and values that individuals have will have an impact on how they interact with others, how they deal with those challenges, and how they approach themselves in terms of preparation and training. Just a whole host of factors of why people might be more capable of dealing with challenges and performing at peak and optimal levels.
And just as in the army, you look for physical prowess, but do you think is the mental aspect screened, or you know what I mean, when you're trying to recruit a soldier? Do they don't address that situation?
Yeah, no, I think when we talk to the soldiers, we talk about them as sort of tactical athletes. There's a lot of physical training that they go through. Every morning they're there for an hour and a half minimum, training their bodies from a physical standpoint. Obviously, there's a lot of tactical and technical training that they provide to the soldiers, depending on what their military operation specialty is. But when we provide the additional training, we kind of create more of a complete individual by providing that mental and emotional component to the training as well. So you've got the physical, the technical, the tactical, but then you also have the mental and emotional, because I think there's a strong acknowledgement with that community that there's only so far that you can get without having your mind prepared and mentally being ready to go, focused and motivated and feeling confident with regards to whatever the task is, whether it's flying a helicopter or whether it's firing your weapon in a direct combat engagement, or if you're an engineer, if you're a field archer, like any of those performances, there's certainly a level of mental and emotional control and self-regulation that's necessary to perform at your best.
Steve, we have a comment in the chat section from one of our loyal followers, one of our subscribers here. London Old School is his handle, and his comment is that he suffered from PTSD over a trauma, and it took him years to get over it. You never get over the event, but you learn how to cope with it. Can you speak a little bit about that?
Yeah. It's actually important to make the distinction between the type of psychological background that I have in terms of my training and education.
Yeah,
So I'm not a clinical psychologist. I
absolutely.
don't have the clinical training and things. And so when it comes to working with the soldiers that suffer from things like PTSD, clinical anxiety and depression, suicidal behaviors and gestures and thoughts and things along those lines, it's really outside of my area of expertise. But what I will say is that what we hope to do with our training with the soldiers is to prepare them so that those types of negative outcomes don't exist from the challenges and the adversity that they face during their time in the military and their time on deployments, so that the soldiers are more capable of handling with situation in the moment, so that the lingering effects like PTSD are not the outcomes that come from, like I said, their challenges, their adversities, and their deployments.
Yeah, and obviously there are different levels because a soldier, the ultimate price you can pay is with your life. Going through civilian population and the sport population, it's a different level of risk, let's say.
Yes, absolutely. But it's a voluntary service. So
Yeah,
these guys and these women, they know what they're signing up for. They know what the risks are. They know what the challenges are that they're going to face, and that's why, like you said, that selfless service is definitely one of the values that the soldiers possess.
Steve, do you think that a soldier could hide his deficiencies, mentally speaking? And does that happen?
It would be very difficult. There might be something that you can do on a very short-term, limited basis, but I think the more that you try to hide or avoid those issues that you're going through, the more likely they are to compound. And when there is sort of a larger adversity that you face, I think that, this is just me speaking, but I think you'd be more likely to have a more difficult time overcoming that if you didn't have the deliberate intent behind your mental preparation and sort of your emotional control.
Yeah, because much like in a team environment, a soldier relies on the next guy beside him. Would
Mm-hmm.
you agree with that? Yeah. And do you think the commanding officers would be aware of his lack of mentality, or he's deficient in some way, that his commanding officer would be aware of that?
Yeah. Um, there's definitely something to say about being confident with the person that you're in the foxhole with, or if you're about to breach a room, and try to clear a building or something
Yeah,
along those lines. You're
yeah,
stacked up against the wall with three of your buddies, but you don't have confidence that they are capable of maintaining their composure and not doing the wrong thing. That's definitely going to interfere with your mental preparation prior to engaging in the act itself. So, whether it's all the way up at the leadership level with commanding officers, or whether it's down at the lowest level where you're just a four-man stack of a team, I think that confidence and your ability to say that the person next to me is confident and won't make those types of flying off the handle, non-composed mistakes is critical to success.
Okay, so getting away from the more what serious aspect of being a soldier, and translating this now to a sporting environment, Steve. And I
Yep.
talked to you a little bit about our previous recent history with Arsenal Football Club, and I'll just reiterate that again so that everybody listening can hear as well. We're into almost the end of the first season of a new coach after a coach of 22 years existence, and with many of the same existing players, and those existing players would have gotten used to that coach after 22 years. All of the ins and outs, the daily routines would have been the same. Not a lot of things would have changed. And now we have a new coach who's working with pretty much the same personnel, and we are having pretty much the same results away from home, particularly that we have had in the last, say, 2 seasons, uh, using the same players. Um, how can we delve into what's going on? Here's what's happening. Our home form has been very, very good all season, playing within the confines of the Emirates Stadium, and particularly in the Premier League, which is the English Premier League, which is more physical, more robust, and more intimidating. When those same players go away from home, the same level of performance is not there. What do you think is, and this is a large question, I understand. What do you think is
Yeah.
the cause? What is going on with the mentality of the players?
Yeah, that's a tough question. And I would say, I can speak generally about, athletes from a sports psychology perspective of like a home field advantage and kind of what happens. But, without being in the clubhouse and talking to the players and the coaches and the supporting staff and, following along with the team, it's, these would be all my sort of just assumptions.
Yeah.
And I'm not familiar with whether or not the club actually employs a full-time sports psychologist. I don't know if that's something that you know off the top of your head.
I would think that there is a sports psychologist in all English Premier League clubs. And if anybody in the
Yeah,
comments knows anything to corroborate that or different, let me know. But let's assume that there is a sports psychologist at
yeah.
the club.
Well, I think you can look at the home field advantage from a couple of different lanes or scopes, and maybe we can dive into each of these individually. But yeah, just sort of speaking on a broad basis, things like the crowd, things like travel, um, maybe some rule changes or sort of the environment that they're playing in, and even some social issues. Like those to me would be some of like the four pillars that might have an impact on how a team plays at home versus how they play on the road.
Yeah. In your professional experience, Steve, have you found home issues or family issues or something preying on the mind of a person would impact their performance?
Yes, yeah, and that's absolutely one of the issues that any performer in any context has to get kind of squared away if they want to perform at their best, right? So
Yeah.
whether it's a baseball player, soccer player, football player, um, if they are thinking about the fight that they had with their wife, before they left on the road trip, and now they haven't spoken to that person in a couple of days, or maybe they're having some financial issues and making ends meet, and they're trying to kind of cope with that while they're on the road. That's where their focus is. That their focus isn't on hitting the person with a direct pass or tracking the striker coming down the field. Everything that at the Premier League level, at that level of professional competition, you can't afford to not be focusing on the game and the match and what's actually happening. So if your thoughts are anywhere else, you're obviously going to have pretty significant interference with being able to perform.
Steve, we have one player in the team, Skadran Mustafi, who is a German international and 5 years ago won the World Cup with the German national team. So we are wondering as Arsenal fans how, first of all, he won the World Cup because his performances with Arsenal have not been to that level. And
Mm-hmm.
he seems, he is making mistakes. He has made mistakes, but he seems to be going within a shell um, on top of those mistakes. The crowd gets on his back. Have you sort of encountered anything where if you go down that road of negativity, it plays on your mind, it plays in your mentality, and you actually perform worse and worse rather than picking it up and taking it forward? Does that speak to his mental capacity specifically?
Are you saying specifically in reference to like the crowd having getting on his back and booing him and
Exactly.
giving him a hard time at the home field? Yeah,
Exactly.
Yeah, well, I think look at the end of the day, like as a sports fan, we kind of look at athletes as like almost inhuman or superhuman, right? But
Yes.
at the end of the day, like they're humans just like we are, right?
Yes.
And they have emotional responses, right? And so you got to figure, for this individual, he's wanted to do this his entire life. He's trained his entire life to be a part of a professional club,
Yes.
To play on the professional stage, right? A lot of pressure on a young guy who, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, these young guys, they still have a lot of life that they need to kind of learn through, right? And so, everybody wants to be supported and liked, and when you put that kind of pressure on yourself, you're not performing well, and then the crowd starts giving you a hard time. That would hurt. That'd be difficult, and obviously, like we would not, as fans, want that to interfere with your performance. But at the end of the day, like I said, they're human, and when the people that are supposed to like you don't like you, you can definitely get in your head and start to overthink things and put a little bit more pressure on yourself, and maybe that ends up causing you to choke in a big performance with a penalty kick or something along those lines. So yeah, I definitely think that there's something to say for that for sure.
Yeah, you just touched on something there. The penalty kick. What's your perception of what's going on in the penalty kick? It's really a one versus one duel in that situation.
Yeah,
between the striker and the goalkeeper.
Yeah, it's certainly exciting to watch. I think I've seen some research on just like from a reaction time standpoint, what the goalkeeper is capable of doing in terms of reacting and having to make a decision sort of prior to the shot even coming off of the foot of the player, and trying to come up with some cues that they can look at from the person as they can do to walk up to the ball and try to anticipate and predict where the ball's going to go. But I kind of push it back over to you. I would ask you, who do you think has more pressure in that situation? Is it the goalkeeper or is it the person that's actually taking the kick?
The striker definitely has more pressure because they are the ones that are expected to score the goal. The goalkeeper is in a win-win situation, pretty much, in my opinion.
Right.
But you do see the mentality of the goal kicks, and the professional players do research, or the goalkeepers do research whatever striker they're going to come up against that particular week. They do research where they have placed the balls in previous penalty kicks, and they do practice for that. So it really is a mental duel as well. And as I mentioned to you, Steve, we are 10 days away from a major European Cup final for Arsenal, which the potential of penalty kicks is there at the end of the game.
Yeah, and so when you talk about the pressure really is on the striker in that situation, and not necessarily the goalkeeper. Well, the more you place expectations on yourself about, I should be successful here, or this should be easy for me to score this particular goal, the more pressure that you're putting on yourself, the more likely you are to have those mental challenges and have to deal with that pressure is a challenge, right? So,
yeah.
The thing is, even the best players aren't always successful, right? I mean, I think back to, I feel like it was like Messi or something a few years ago, where it was like a big deal, where he was just like not, on the international level, just wasn't putting penalty kicks in. So, there is sort of you have to expect that it's not a 100% turnover rate in terms of success. Some of that acceptance has to be practiced too, I think, in that scenario.
You say practice, Steve. Do you, in your area of expertise, do you feel like people who practice these situations day in, day out are more easily able to cope with the situation when it arises in a very, very stressful environment?
Yes, but only to a point. honestly. I mean, there's only so much in terms of preparing yourself to be on that type of stage with that type of pressure that you can do. When you're practicing in indoors or in your home facility or whatever that is, because um, psychologically and physiologically, the arousal level is just going to be changed when you've got 50,000 people that are in the stadium and another couple million that are watching on TV. It's the difference between winning a title and essentially going home with nothing at all. There's only so much that you can do to prepare for that, where I think that's what really separates like the best from just those that are very good.
Yeah. In terms of the performance of an individual player, is it your experience that can be coached to a higher level, or do you believe the individual is the individual, even at the grand old age of 27, where he's three-quarters of the way through his career at this point? Do you think this player could be coached when you are at a certain level, advanced in your years within the profession?
Yeah, I 100% think that individual, that hypothetical individual could be coached, and the reason why I say that is because typically at the professional level, everybody, for the most part, has sort of an equal playing field in terms of like they're all physically very gifted and talented, and they work very hard on their strategy and whatnot. But a lot of what differentiates those individuals at that level is the mental, sort of the mental toughness, the mindset that an individual has, and I think that is definitely something that can be deliberately trained. As you start to go towards your last half or last quarter of your career, maybe you're not as fast as you used to be. Maybe you don't have the same ball handling skills as you used to be. Maybe you don't have the same reaction time that you used to have, right? But you can still have, from like a mental strength standpoint, you can be very composed in those pressure situations because of your experience. You can go in to a difficult environment, feel very confident. You can be a good team player, a good leader, have good communication skills, develop the cohesion in the clubhouse. These are all things that even with being three-quarters of the way through your career and with some advanced age, that you could still train in a deliberate fashion and apply in a deliberate way as well.
Okay, so Steve, what you're saying is basically the mechanisms within the football club itself. They would probably have a sports psychologist, and the deficiency in performance in the players can be coached to such a level that the problems could go away.
Yeah, in theory, I mean, obviously that's a two-way relationship, right? So that player has to be accepting of the type of training and the deliberate application, and the acceptance of the fact that it's a skill that can be trained through practice to get better at it, right? If that player isn't amenable to that sort of concept, then the best sports psychologist in the world, the best coach in the world, is not going to help that individual.
And further to that, Steve, and we had talked about a previous regime of 22 years where I guess everybody would get comfortable, and certain individuals within a team setting have different levels of intensity and drive. Do you think with a change of regime can also engender a downturn in form in terms of not wanting to do the new things that the new coaches wants to institute? In order, in layman's terms, set in their ways, not open to new things. After 22 years, I guess none of us would be open to new things too much, but that's the life of a professional football player.
Sure. I mean, again, we talked about humanizing these players, and change is difficult for everybody.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's going to be something that oftentimes in all professional sports leagues with all teams, that kind of regime change after a long period of time, and bringing in new ownership and new staff and new coaches and new ideas. sometimes that's a quick transition, and sometimes it takes a long time for it to be implemented, and sometimes it never really gets accepted. But I think you have to look at the impact that like culture has on the club, on the organization, right? Like you, with a new ownership group and a new coach and a new coaching staff, there's probably sort of a culture or climate, team climate that they're trying to create. And sometimes, like I said, that's accepted by the players that have been there, and sometimes it's rejected. It never works. Sometimes it just takes some time too. So it kind of varies.
Yeah, and Steve, we're in an age now in soccer, football, that the players are sometimes bigger than the coach, bigger names,
Right.
bigger status, and it's a lot more of a personal. You have to work well with the person. It's a personality thing rather than the coach telling the player what he wants from them. And I think you might have encountered some of those situations within your field as well.
You gotta figure the coaches themselves are not making the kind of money that some of these big ticket players are making, right?
Yes.
And at the end of the day, like there's only so much strategy and tactical sort of experience that a coach is going to bring into the game, because the players can be the one that plays the game, right? So a lot of the good managers and coaches are good sort of people managers. You know what I mean? Like they sort of manage the different personalities well, and they're very clear with the communication about their expectations for each individual player. And those are typically the best managers across all sports, are the ones that can really manage the personalities more so than the in-game like decisions that are being made.
And we have a question from one of our subscribers as well. Again, Steve, London Old School. Does Steve think that egos can clash if a new coach comes in with a strong personality?
Yeah, absolutely, right. But that's why I think that it's so important for that new staff to just come in and be very clear with their expectations, right, and also to maintain that level of accountability. If I don't know, if they come up with this is the punishment for doing this particular thing wrong, and they tend to favor some players differently than other players because this person is a better player than this other player is. Like all of that is going to play a huge role. So I think is the consistency of the new ownership and the new coaching staff and stuff. If they have to deal with all these different types of egos, that's really going to oftentimes be the difference maker in the culture actually changing in a positive way, or becoming very toxic, and you see that the players aren't performing well because they're not enjoying their time with the club, with the team.
Yeah, very interesting. A couple of comments going back to the penalty kicks. Noe Donis, thank you. He said a penalty kick is a mental game between the striker and the goalkeeper, in his opinion. And then London Old School, the extra pressure of a penalty shootout must be immense. How do you think? Do you have any knowledge of how professional sportsmen try to recreate those environments that are most difficult to deal with? Another tough question.
So I think what you're asking is how during practice do they try to recreate
that situation that they can face in a good and positive way?
Yeah, I think I think what coaches try to do is they try to recreate as best as they can with at the end of practice for something, we're going to take these types of kicks, and they'll do some kind of punishment if we don't do this, or sometimes there'll be teams that'll pump in like crowd noise, guys will be wearing their headphones with crowd noise being played, to kind of recreate sort of the sound, or maybe they'll do these practice penalty kicks at the end of a particularly grueling physical session, so that they can be more comfortable with what it feels like to take these kicks when they're physically fatigued. So there are certain things that that coaching staffs can try to do to recreate that, but I think kind of what I went back to is experience is going to be the best thing that helps that with confidence. We know from a sports psychology standpoint that confidence comes from many different factors, but previous experience is the number one contributor to somebody feeling confident in a situation. And so when they can draw from the fact that they've already done this, 60 or 70 times in their career, that's going to be a major factor in the confidence that they have going in, especially if they've had success over those 60 to 70 attempts. And, if you've got a new player, young player, doesn't have that experience or hasn't had success at this level, that's what has the impact on their confidence.
Very good. Steve, do you think that the individual drive within certain players needs to have there needs to be a certain amount of that within a team environment in order to move the whole team as a unit properly? Some will have more drive than others. Do you believe in that?
Yeah, and I think there's, when we talk about that drive, I think it's important to differentiate, like, sort of the motivation of the team and being bought into the success of the team and where the team is going, but also to take into effect individual motivation, right? So maybe you have a player on your team who is personally motivated to put up very good individual stats at the end of the year so that they can get a nice contract for themselves.
Yes.
There might be another player who is less interested in those individual stats, but is more interested in the team success, right?
Yes.
So what it is that's driving those individual players, their sources of motivation, could vary pretty considerably. And the research in sports psychology shows that depending on what that source of motivation is, will have an impact on a lot of things, which one of them includes perseverance and sort of driving through challenges and adversity. So the more internally driven you are, the more likely you are to persevere amongst those challenges and struggles, whereas you're simply just playing for more external sources of motivation. Your enjoyment levels will decrease, your attitude and mindset is typically worse off, your perseverance is typically deteriorated, your ability to communicate and work within a team is also hindered. So a lot of different impacts in terms of just the source of what is driving the player's behavior.
Steve, do you believe the belief system within the player drives them to achieve results? Let me further expand on that. If you're playing in two different competitions and you believe you have a better chance in one competition than the other, will you typically see better results and more drive in that one competition that the player or players believe they can excel in rather than the other one?
Oh yeah, I mean, there's a direct link between performance and confidence, right? And so if you know, and you've already decided before the match starts that the opposing team is a better team than we are. We don't have a chance of winning this match, right?
Yeah, and
that self-fulfilling prophecy, more likely than not, will be followed through with, right? As opposed to you go into a match and say, hey, we've got a shot at this. Like, let's leave open that possibility of success and bring in, a level of optimism into the chance of us winning this particular competition. You're more likely to at least allow for the possibility of success.
Yeah, I used to remember as a youth player, I'd look across and you'd see all these imposing, physically bigger players, and you almost lose the game before you even started it.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. Right. I mean, we've all kind of experienced that, and it goes beyond just playing in a sporting environment. I mean, even if you're at your work or something like that, you've got a big presentation coming up or something, and you psych yourself out of it and say, I'm not ready for this because they're going to eat me alive or something. Yeah. I mean, you're significantly less likely to put up a good performance even in that setting as well.
That does happen to me in my work environment as well. I'm pretty good at what I do, but I do have those moments where I say to myself, I can't do this, and maybe it's a time constraint as well, which crushes on me. Is there any words of advice you can give to people that are feeling that way? What should they do? How should they feel? If you can speak to that, that would be great.
Sure. I mean, I think it comes down to understanding that the events are not what drives our consequences. It's really our thoughts, right? So when you think about, like, I am not a result of the things that happen to me. I'm a result of the thoughts that I have about those things that happen to me, right? So if I want to, like, pre-plan or pre-program deliberate thoughts that would be more productive, that would set me up for success, that's what's going to drive the emotions that I have of feeling confident, ready, secure, calm, and then, those reactions that I'll have are more likely to be successful performances. So, the simple advice is be aware of your thoughts and prepare your thoughts to drive you to feel the way you want to feel for any one of those upcoming performances.
Very good. Getting back to the part, Steve, where we were talking about different competitions maybe suited to the players. I'll give you a little bit of background and more specifically what's going on with our season. There's a top four within our league, and the top four qualify for the higher level of European competition, the Champions League. And we had very, very good home form up until the final few weeks when up until the last two games, we had not lost every game but one. So we had won 14 games, drew 2, and lost 1 up until probably the last 2 games. And the players just seem to wilt under the pressure or under the grind of a long season, under the squad maybe not being strong enough. But what would you attribute that to? So they fell away at the end of the season, wilted under pressure, where the home crowd did get on their backs in the last home game.
Yeah, it's tough to say. It really is. I mean, it's tough to say what could cause something like that. But I think it's important to know that every team is trying to win the games, right? And so there's only going to be one winner of every game. There's only going to be one champion at the end of the day. There's only going to be a certain number of teams that get chosen to the Champions League, and all the other teams all wanted that same role, but that's not what happens in professional sports. You can't have all teams winning every game and stuff. So it could be a matter of the guy's mindset. It could be a matter of their physical preparation, just kind of being fatigued and worn down over the course of a long season. It could be just that the other teams just outplayed them, just played better. There's so many different reasons of why something like that might exist, and kind of hard to really know what's going on unless you're really talking to the players themselves. And even the interviews and stuff that those guys are going to provide after the games and before the games, I mean, they're all trained in terms of what they're allowed to say, what they should say, what they shouldn't say, and stuff. So you're not really getting like any unfiltered comments usually from these guys. So it's very difficult to say specifically this is the reason, but you can certainly postulate several potential reasons.
I have a question, and we're getting towards the end of the show, Steve. Thanks very much for coming on. We got a couple more questions for you.
Sure.
And this is, I think this show is going really, really well so far. Thanks, Steve, for coming on. The question is, the question of mentality in certain competitions stretches to the coach. If he has a successful record, which our coach does have in this competition, could that affect the players and their mentality and belief if they have a coach who has been there and done that before?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I kind of said, when it comes to the role of the coaches, and there's a lot of just like manipulating of the people, the players, right? And so if they are more stoic on the sidelines when there's a bad call that's made, the players are typically reflective of that type of behavior and that type of emotional control. If a coach is saying the right things in terms of the confidence that he's bringing to the team for an upcoming competition, an upcoming match, playing against a particularly difficult opponent or team, the typically the team will be reflective of that same mindset. So a lot of, again, what the coach is responsible for doing is to create that mindset and, kind of massage and manage the players so that they mentally are preparing themselves for each of the upcoming competitions. Obviously, if they've had previous success doing that, that's going to lead to more confidence. You kind of already hit on how confidence is going to have an impact on performance.
Yeah. Particularly if we compare the previous coach of 22 years to this coach of just the last 11 or 12 months, the things that are the same are primarily the players, the environment that they're working in, physical environment. But the difference can be the coach itself. Our previous coach of 22 years, maybe the players became more familiar and more jaded and more used to the environment, and some things can grow stale, right, Steve?
Sure.
And we had a coach who would sit in his seat when things were going wrong, and now we have a coach who is more active on the sideline. Seems outwardly to be more encouraging publicly. I'm sure behind closed doors, the previous coach did the same thing. But do you think that can freshen things up if you have a coach that is outwardly encouraging, very vibrant, very animated in a good way toward the players?
Yeah, I think that can play a role, but I also think that the players eventually are going to figure out, is this person authentic? Is it genuine, or is this just sort of a show, right? Because the players themselves need to be fully bought into who this person is, and if this is just sort of an act, eventually it's going to get old, right?
Yes.
So
yes.
You see across all professional sports, eventually teams will release their coaches and switch coaches. And, maybe it was a more relaxed guy that was originally there, and then they bring in a vibrant, more energetic guy, and maybe that's not successful. They kind of flip flop between coaches, and, over the course of several years. But usually ownership decides time to just kind of shake things up and see what happens. And sometimes that works, and sometimes it doesn't.
Yeah, that's very interesting what you say, that the coach needs to be authentic and it needs to be somebody that the players can respect. And you're right.
Yeah.
We've seen it time and time again that players they almost figure out what the coach is all about, and they maybe stop listening if they don't respect what the coach can do.
Sure. I mean, you think back to like great leaders that you've had, whether that's a good boss that you had at work, or whether it was a good coach, or whether it's a good captain on a sports team, and they're able to inspire their team, right?
Yeah.
It's not necessarily about their physical capabilities or even sometimes their ability to play well or to perform well, but it's about their ability to be authentic and be able to inspire others. And be able to, sort of help make the group better as a whole, rather than focusing on individuals. And so the best coaches are able to be those ones that reflect those same sort of values and beliefs.
Yeah. Yeah, and we have seen, Steve, very, very many great players in their day have turned their hand to coaching, have not been able to have the same amount of success as they had as a player. So, and very often it's the players who have not been the best players in the world that make the best coaches.
Right. Yeah, I think that there's not necessarily any kind of direct relationship between if you're a good player, you'll be a good coach, because at the end of the day, when you become a coach, you're no longer the one that's actually capable of scoring or
impacting,
playing on the field, right? So the skills of what makes a good coach in terms of your ability to communicate, your ability to be able to maintain emotional control, your ability to be able to inspire others to maintain motivation over the course of a long training season, off season, during the season. All these things are not necessarily the same characteristics of what makes a good player when they're actually in their playing career on the field.
Yeah. One final question then, Steve. As mentioned in one of the comments, we have a coach who has we're going to a European Cup final, the Europa League, on the 29th of May in Baku. Um, Ridiculous location, but that's neither here nor there. We have a coach who has won this competition 3 times before. So, can you speak to the belief, as we maybe mentioned already, that the players will have in that coach in the competition and being able to buy into what the coach wants them to do for that final?
Yeah, but only to a certain degree, because this particular coach's success was with other players within other team, right?
Yes,
So
yes,
he kind of has to bridge the gap between, like, yes, I have had success in this particular environment, but also tie that to now with this team that we've been with for the last 12 months.
yes,
How do those two things kind of blend together, right? Because the players at the end of the day are not going to be inspired by the success that this coach had with another team unless he's able to bring that same level of experience and again tie that into who the current players on this current roster are and what they've done over the last year that would set them up for that success in that final in a couple of weeks.
yeah. In terms of this season, we have one final game this season, Steve, and we had 2 opportunities. If we do win this Europa League uh, title, that will get us automatic promotion to the Champions League, the higher level of European competition I mentioned. But
Yeah.
our first chance went away with being the top 4 in the league. Can you speak to, final question, the mentality of having missed out on that one opportunity and now having that the second opportunity is our last opportunity to fulfill our goals for the season, and how each result, if we lose it or if we win it, how that will impact the summer, let's say, before next season starts?
Well, I could tell you personally, if I was working with the team and I was working with the players, I would not have them be thinking that far down the line, about what impact whether we win or lose this game is going to have on the off season and what
Yeah,
impact that's going to have on next season being a part of the Champions League or not. Um, I would have them focus. I would also have them not focused on the fact that we missed this opportunity by finishing in the top 4 of the league standing,
yeah,
and the missed opportunity that we had. Really what their focus should be on is just simply the preparation that they have for the upcoming game. Whether it's getting their physical form ready to go, getting their minds ready to go, going through their pregame routines, and the week prior to the game, the night before the game, the morning of the game, all the things that they have control over
yes,
is what they should be focused on leading up to the game, and sort of just taking it a few minutes at a time, whether it's one half at a time or one play at a time. Really just focus on the present moment and not thinking too far ahead of the implications of the win or the loss, or the missed opportunity that they had. Because if that's where your focus is, again, at this level of play, you're not going to have any kind of success.
yeah. And the mentality of any code of life really demands that you do it in the now, right? In the moment,
Correct.
and not to be distracted by anything.
Yeah. And all those additional pressures that you would put on yourself that would cause additional anxiety that's going to, interfere with your ability to perform. It's obviously not going to help you, right? So
Yeah,
there's no reason to put additional pressure on yourself rather than just saying, like, all right, we're going to play one game at a time. We're going to play, one play at a time. We're going to play, 1 minute at a time, focusing on the things that I have control over, and then the outcome. If you do those things properly, will take care of itself, right? Like that, you'll get the outcome that you're looking for if that's where you're focused.
yeah. I think in any,
doing what you're supposed to do.
yeah, in any code of life, that is a great mantra to follow. I have I was going to sign off there, but I do have one more question, Steve, and
Sure.
it's a good one from London Old School. We have there's a couple of players that will be on the opposite sides of the field, and it will be their last game for their club in their career. Will that affect them? Will the occasion affect them positively or negatively?
Yeah. Well,
seeing that this is their last game for their respective clubs.
Yeah. And again, I think it's been a theme since we've been starting this conversation is that these guys are humans, right? And so they've been playing for a long time in front of this particular crowd, or this has been a dream for them to wear that particular kit, their uniform, that jersey. Whether it's maybe wrapping up their careers for good, and this is what they've been, this has been their dreams since they were a child. Like, from a human perspective, like, that's emotionally going to have an impact on you. And, you hope that these guys at that particular level have the deliberate tools to be able to manage those thoughts, manage those emotions, be able to get themselves in their sort of zone, to be able to perform at their best, and not let the occasion sort of take over, and interfere with them being successful at that level. Obviously, if you're a fan of the opposing team, you want all of those things to happen so that they aren't focused and they are emotional to make bad impulsive decisions so that they can win.
This is my final question, and we're going to close the show with this one then, Steve. I'm just going to tag on to that. And the question is escaping me. The question is escaping me. But listen, we'll leave it for there. We'll leave it for that right now. Just one further question for you, Steve. Have I converted you to being an Arsenal fan now?
So I'll give you a quick funny story. So when I first started becoming a fan of soccer, it was a result of getting the FIFA demo from, it's been so many years now, but the demo itself, you only had a couple of choices of teams that you can choose to play as, and the choices were Barcelona and Chelsea.
Yeah.
And so this was when Messi was beginning his career, and so Barcelona was doing very well, and I chose Barcelona. I became a pretty big fan of theirs, but I also only knew Chelsea as the other option as the team, to play. And so I was like, I don't know, they both seem like the good teams in their respective leagues, between the Liga and the EPL.
Yeah.
So I said I'll be a fan of Chelsea and I'll be a fan of Barcelona because those are the two best teams if I want to start paying attention to soccer and stuff. So, but I always thought that like Arsenal was cool because the Gunners and just like they had such a rabid fan base. So I'll say for to wrap up the podcast here, I hope that they do well with the Europa League game that they have coming up in a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
For your sake and for your listeners' sake, and for the sake of all those guys that have been pulling their hair out with all those terrible away losses throughout the season and stuff that we talked about. Yeah.
Well, London Old School. You may know in doing your research on this that our deadly enemies are Tottenham Hotspurs. So London Old School said at least it was not Spurs or Tottenham Hotspur that you follow. You follow Chelsea a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, I know the big teams and stuff, and I know like the crazy success that who was like Leicester City had. That was like their odds to win were like 1 in like 10,000 or something, and they won the title a couple of years ago. And I do like following Man United, Man City, Wayne Rooney and stuff. Like when I was following soccer pretty good. I was into EPL and La Liga, and the Champions League, and some of that stuff, and I've fallen off of it a little bit harder to follow over here. The games just aren't on at the same time and on the same channels and stuff as baseball or hockey and stuff like that.
Unfortunately, I'm at work for the majority of these games, the European games. I'm at work. Unfortunately, yes.
Yeah. So, it makes it tough to be a fan, but I definitely appreciate the challenge that these guys have and the level of competition over there. I try to follow with the U.S. national team and stuff, and the challenges that they obviously face with the World Cups and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So I know that there's some pretty good players that are playing over in Europe right now for our national team.
As supporters, it's probably easy, but to misunderstand the pressures that these players are under. But then on the flip side, some supporters think that they're the ones that are under pressure. They have to spend a lot of money to get to the games. they spend a lot of money to follow their team, and when they don't get the required success, it's often difficult to understand. Um,
Yeah.
these
Yeah, they
professional
feel like they're
sportsmen
sort
are
of
getting very well paid.
Sure. I mean, you get emotionally invested and tied to those teams. I mean, even when you're talking as a fan, talk about the team as we, and us. And if you're out on the team, you're not playing, but you feel so connected to the organization and stuff. And that's what's fun about being a fan.
Yeah. Hey, Steve, I remembered the question I wanted to ask, and then we will close the show. I promise we will close the show then. One final question is, so Chelsea Football Club, are the opponents to Arsenal in this European final. They have secured top four in the league. They do not have the added pressure of trying to win the trophy to attain Champions League football. So they've already secured Champions League football. Will the pressure be off Chelsea a little bit and more on Arsenal?
Again, I go back to pressure is an interpretation, and it's a thought that you put in your own head. The game is still the same game. It's still, the 90 minutes, of full time and two halves, and on a pitch in front of a group of fans. It's a big crowd, and you're still hitting the ball into a goal. Like the added pressure is the thought that you put on the game itself, and so if that's not what you're thinking about. You're just thinking about doing your job as a football player. Then there is no additional pressure on either team. Now, that's easier said than done, right? Because there is obviously a lot of high expectations, and there's a lot of implications to winning and losing in a game like that. But if you can control the thoughts as a player that you have leading into that particular game, then I don't think that there would be necessarily any additional pressure, because you're just focused on what you have control over, which is just what you do when the game's actually being played.
Steve, thanks so much for coming on. Really appreciate your input on everything. We talked about the life of a soldier, the life of civilians, and the life of a professional sports player. And really, really value your input on everything. I think it was a great show. If I do say so myself.
Great. I appreciate you reaching out to me. And I mean, this is the stuff that I love to do. This is my passion. It's talking sports psychology and applying it to sports and stuff, and talking to people that are interested in the mindset of a professional athlete and mentality of high competition play. It's enjoyable for me. So I appreciate you reaching out. The questions that the listeners that you had today were asking. Hope that we can keep the conversation going, and like I said, I hope you guys, for your own sake, that the team has success in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, we're praying, because it's going to be two different outcomes, obviously, two different views from the fan base, and we can see either side of what might happen, but hopefully we can move on and we win the trophy and we move on to the next season. And hopefully I can have you on next season if that would be possible, Steve, as well. I'll call in your services one more time.
Yeah, no, that'd be great. I'd be happy to come back and expand on some of the discussions that we had. Maybe talk a little bit about the impact that you guys as fans can have to keep that home field advantage going.
I will, if that's okay with you, Steve. I'll leave your details in the description, that people can maybe check you out on Twitter and follow you and all that good stuff. So.
Yeah, that'd be great. I mean, the best way to get in touch with me still is on Twitter. So hit me up with that handle. And if your listeners have any additional questions based on what we talked about today, I'd be happy to answer those as well. And I try to put out some content every once in a while and retweet some good stuff from the sports psychology side of things.
Thanks so much, Steve.
All right, thank you. Have a great day. Right?
You too. Thank you. Bye. So that was Steve Cohen, sports psychologist, and I usually don't do outros, but this was a really, really good show. We covered a lot of things with Steve, the life of a soldier, which is the ultimate price. The mentality of a soldier has got to be there when he's going into combat. We talked about the life of a civilian and how we deal with things in work life as well. And you know, um, but I wanted to delve into what Steve could give us in reference to Arsenal, what we're doing away from home. Talked about a lot of great things that we can think about and really get around. Um, London Old School and Noe had some great questions. Thank you. Um, this show and this episode and this channel could not survive without subscribers and those who participate in it. If you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing. This has been a great episode. Thanks to London Old School. I know it's getting pretty late there for you, but do appreciate your participation. And I thought that this show would be a great way to, as a kind of a preview for the Europa League final. We have missed out on top four qualification, and we really have this last chance to move forward and have a successful season. Unfortunately for Unai Emery and the Arsenal players, it really does come down to the success of this season. Really does come down to this last game versus Chelsea, and it's going to be a nervous 10 days until Baku. But we do hope that many Gunner fans can get to the stadium and bring an atmosphere, and we can bring the trophy home. Yeah, like I said earlier, we would like to have Steve come on next season. Let's see how we're doing next season. I'll pick a decent time in the season, maybe a difficult time in the season, because every season brings its own problems, and we do well, and then we have a dip. So maybe it'll be a good time to bring home Steve back on next season. I want to really take an opportunity to thank everybody who has taken time to watch this show. I will be putting it out across social media and having people watch this on playback. I think it was a really good show. But thanks to everybody who has come on, Noe and London Old School. Gunded News, you better be dunking yourself right now in ice cold water because you've got a pass today, but we'll want you back next week. But for now, if you're new to the channel, if you're passing by, consider hitting that subscribe button. I just brought you a great show with a sports psychologist, and we delved into a lot of things, and most of it Arsenal, but I think it was very interesting. Until next time, guys, keep watching the content I'm giving you. Going to try and fill out these next 10 days, and even into the summer, we're going to do things. So, really do appreciate everybody coming on. Appreciate you, London Old School and Noe, Richard and Alex, all the others, all my subscribers. Hope you enjoy this on the watch back. But I'm out of here for now, and I will see you, everybody, next week. Okay.